Hello, everyone. So once again, welcome you to our industry guest speaker series. Tonight, we've got a special guest joining us from New York, courtesy of an introduction from a current student, Joyce, who put Leecy Li on our radar. Very exciting talk coming up. But one of the things that I'd like to do as part of our practice here is the land acknowledgement. So with the Center for Digital Media, we do acknowledge that we're on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish, Squamish, and Musqueam nations, and we appreciate all the collaboration possibilities and ongoing efforts that we're making to make meaningful collaborations as we move forward in reconciliation and all the ways that we can do. I encourage people to check out an article on our site that an alumni member, John Pantherbone, just posted. So he was our first Indigenous graduate, and again, we're working towards that end. But with that, I am going to switch things up and go virtual background at CDM. So with this, we're back to the Zoom sessions of guest speakers. One day when we return to the real life thing, I'll be able to thank my guests in person. But tonight, Leecy Li has prepared a special presentation for us. We'll go through that. We'll have some time for Q&A. Any students on the call, if you have questions as the talk moves along, you can post it in the chat. We can get to it later on. Or if there's an opportune moment to jump in, I might ask the question. But with that, why don't we give a virtual welcome to Leecy. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here and looking forward to what you prepared for us tonight.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And hi there, my name is Leecy. I'm so happy to be here, and thanks Joyce for putting us together. And I finally are able to talk overseas. It's like it's a great pleasure. And like I mentioned a couple of years ago, I did apply for CDM, and so that we had a little exchange there. I was like, what really happened? Why did I not making it? So finally making it here, life just goes in full circles. It's wonderful. And I wanted to bring my stories here, and hopefully it's relevant to your stories, and it can inspire you for your career, your life, and then in little moments in here. And before I even started, I wanted to ask most of you, like, show of hands, how many of you are going to be a designer or are interested in learning UX? Just let me know. Like, I can see a few of you. Great. And a few of blank screens as well. But I'm hoping behind the screens and there's also
there's
people
lots
who
of
are...
virtual thumbs up I'm seeing. If I had to count, that's a good number of both real life
Great,
and virtual
yay.
thumbs. There you go.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Cool. Okay, then I have more confidence. I hope that what I'm gonna share will be relevant to you. So like, this is what I'm bringing on the table is my 10 years of making of a designer. How did I start in UX? What did I learn as a student, as an Asian international, as a designer? Let's just travel back together so that we can all just take a look. I graduated in Beijing in 2011 from Communication University of China, which is called CUC. And I was majored in digital media arts. Yes, I was goofy back then. Still, that little kid is in me, and you'll see when my story unpacks. And little did I know what it means. I took an offer in Motorola as a media designer and jump-started my career there. I was the youngest on the team, and my job was doing visual and motion guidelines for Android. And you can see, just to give you a taste of what the era felt like, I don't know, any of you still have memories back then where everything was transitioning from feature phones to all the glass rectangles. And where you see on the left top corner where there's like an interesting exploration that I did was the hard keys that was like in and out of the screens. And you see there are like 4 hard keys, 3, and then 4 again. And gingerbread, jelly bean was the buzzwords back then. So I also started tackling different resolution spaces, like devices, users, and that brought me to the biggest doubt, which I believe that this group might also have at a certain point is, what the heck is UX? What is the difference between UI and UX? And that question carried me through my first major project. It's called Shop for Apps. the goal is to design Motorola's app store in China mainland for 3 million users to bring an app shopping experience to life. And here are some wireframes made by Xiaoting, who is the UX designer I was paired with, which I learned a ton from. But back then, I thought her work was like kind of ugly, but it makes sense. And then I took over and turned them into Motorola branded mocks and then handed over to engineers. And that was more of the waterfall workflow. And I asked myself, it seems like I can do both, but there was something missing. And I didn't know what, and I struggled for 2 years. And then I still wanted to find that thing. So that was the time I decided to move to New York, and I went back to grad school at Parsons, and this is the building I took most of the classes. And that program was called Design and Technology, where I was forced to think before execute. So critical thinking, documentation, research process, that's where we really get to be really rigorously trained about human interaction, human-centered interaction. And it was really hard. You can see it on my face, where everybody was having oily hair and never shower and have to like stay overnight. I'm sure that you have experienced it at a certain point as well. But it was also fun, right? Like I'm sure you can also relate when you don't have to work for bosses. And I took my chance. I prototyped a lot of stuff for chefs, students, even cats. The right bottom corner was a toy I made to play with my cat or taking selfies of her. It was a win-win. It was totally a blast. I handcrafted circuits. I used the microcomputers like Raspberry Pi, and I wrote code to trigger interactions. I don't know if you ever get to experience this in this program as well, but it was definitely a really good exercise to contextualize things in life with the abstract technology. But back then I was like, what the heck is this class? Why am I here? Why am I doing all this? I'm not going to use it in my work life. But it's all about finding problem space and solving it with digital solutions. So if you ever had the same questions, just take this as my learning, and that could really inspire yours. And so that really gives me the second question is, what does it really mean to be user-centered? What does it mean to have a heart for users? And which later turned out to be the key learning for me to really become a UX person. So in 2014, this is my first attempt to being a UX person. I took an internship in my American Express on Wall Street. So first time being thrown into professional setting, learning American corp culture. I hang out with the interns from Wharton, from Columbia, NYU, Harvard, Stanford. And if we're gonna talk about my different backgrounds, I was really the only designer intern. I was the only international student, and it was intimidating. I thought I developed all my social skills from scratch over happy hours, beers, a bunch of them. And my journey of finding my voice also began there. So upon departure, I made a poster you can see in the middle of the screen, or you see our team was made of only one Asian girl and a lot of bold guys. So that was really the first time I had a blast. I made the money for the first time in the States, and I didn't get a return offer. So in 2015, after I graduated from Parsons, I went unemployed. I was lost. I sent 200 applications and I got probably 8 replies. I went to an interview where they asked me if I'm interested in being a real estate agent. True story. I don't know if you ever experienced that, but let me tell you, it's all part of the process. So all that pressure let me escape to this new world where I'm like, I just want to hide in the fun wonderland. But little did I know, I actually got fully charged. I was so inspired, not only by Mr. Walt Disney and his mouse friend, but also there was a famous quote, I don't know any of you know it. He said, if you can dream it, you can do it. But also looking at the castle in person, that felt so dreamy. I was so inspired. But when I went back and pulled out my phone and looking at the pictures, and I was like, it doesn't look dreamy. It looks pretty shaggy. So where is the magic coming from? Why were I so attached? Why did everybody enjoy it? How was that experience made of? What was that made of? What was the secret ingredient? And later on, I actually discovered there are a lot of secret ingredients in designing an experience in space. So, which is essentially UX design. You don't have to draw or have an art background. And what is essential is to be observant and ask, what do my users need? And that is user-centered approach. You want to make their days better, and you want to understand their needs. So that I'll give you an example of a ride, because visitors now are stepping into something that's totally made up. So when you are there, we wanted to create a transition to ease people in. It's an immersive setup. And it gets even more immersive to bring people's attention to a storyline. And then you can get engaged and you get more curious. And then it puts you in the center of the stage. Now you are the hero. And if you remember any similar experiences that they started to talk to you, they're like, you're on a mission, you're here to save the world, and you gotta save it all. And then when the ride really comes, the characters are with you, and they document you also, so sneaky. And then you're like really experiencing it, and you're inside of the story, you're creating your own story. And after that, they haunt you, well, in a good way, but you have to take something home, something you can remember, and then eventually you'll come back. So that is all in this like little journey that designer designed, so that becomes an experience. So that carefully analyzed your needs, your goals, and your emotional arcs. So now when you left and you're like, wow, the whole world changed, and that's not all. And if you can take a guess, what else is there? Yep, the stuff. Many of you, me included, every time I demand a picture with the princess, that's just like cliche, but the thing to do. But do you know Disney employees won't speak anything outside of Disney content until they take their uniform off? I actually took a chance to go to their conferences where they revealed all their secrets of designing that experience. So like Bella would only talk about beasts. Princess Snow White only talks about Apple. You won't hear them talk about Justin Bieber, even if they wanted to. And this is what I saw when I was riding with the Pirates of the Caribbean. I got stuck for half an hour, had to exit from an emergency exit. And you see, this is the backstage. There's no magic and nothing. It was at the moment that I realized that it's really the design power that brings the magic to life. So they also didn't allow me to take a picture or post a picture at all. So this is what I found from Google. And you see there's like a secret route underground for like Little Mermaid, for example, to walk and then secretly and magically just appear at a spot. That's how dedicated they are in terms of designing all this experience. And it's all about experience design. And if you take an even closer look, you see service design as well. Like every staff member was really well trained, and they consider all the visitors' needs regardless of age, gender, job, diversity. They created a welcoming, a warm vibe that attracts all possible audiences. One of the examples is you never hear them broadcasting loss to children. Even that happens every now and then, but you don't hear it. And all the staff are really, really bright, and they talk to you at eye level, no matter how short you are. So they usually would squat down when they talk to a kid, and it will usually say like, have an amazing one. I'm glad you made it here. It feels like this is your home. You finally just got home. So it's not about tech, but it's a connector to a magical experience. And that's what I learned. And that's what made my second stop at Gallagher & Associates. This is an agency where I became an experienced designer in 2016 to create digital storytelling in space. And I did a lot of installations, exhibitions, project mapping, touchwood tables and walls. Who do you think is my target audience? You can type in the chat if you want. Parents, yeah, parents definitely. And there are more. If you really think of like people who go to a museum, there are all kinds of people.
Kids.
Visitors, yes, kids. Students, people for sure.
People, sure. Parents and kids aren't people, apparently, but people.
Yes, scholars, children, teachers, astronauts. I like that one. Yeah, kids hide. Yeah, that's keen observation. So the answer is everybody. Visitors include students, professionals, elderlies, tech savvy or not, with accessibility needs or not, first time comer or returning comer, and sometimes in groups, sometimes for individuals. And I, as a designer, had to consider all that and have to make design decisions that fits all. So that was a good training. And this is one of my works in Johnson & Johnson Museum in New Jersey. So that company had over 100 years of stories. And my task was using technology to design an interactive experience to unpack all the stories and turn their employees into advocates. So this is like an internal facing museum. So I designed this interactive timeline. This is like a wireframe that you can see all the little dots. The dots are representing the symbolized the events that happened based in time, where these are they're like iconic pieces that really come to sit in the vertical timeline with all the historical events people are familiar with, like World War II. So you can get a sense of what a baby powder was like during World War II. And we even created ambient sound like horse footprints on cobble hills just to bring visitors back in time. All that curiosity, compassion, and a sense of pride was infused into the time traveling journey. So that's just a piece of the work I did, which I really liked. And you see where this really brings me to the third stop, which I'll just make a very sudden turn at Google, where I learned that the ultimate difference between product companies and agencies and big tech and a startup or a boutique place where I was at Gallagher and Associates. So I discovered, which is my third question, is everybody seems to be a UX designer or can be a UX person. Why did I say that? So how did I come to this realization? So two big differences that I learned were working at Google NYC. Number one, product design never ends. It only iterates. It's not like you deliver a piece of work and you move on to the next. It's more like something as Google Docs, for example. It just evolves over time, but it's always there. And then the same goes to my stakeholder relationships. They changed from clients like J&J to engineers and product managers. And we have to talk together, work together, collaborate, and that never ends. So you can imagine what a love-hate relationship that we can formulate over time. So I got so many questions like, what is it like working at Google? And my answer is always hosting meetings, because I have to talk to people constantly and intensively so I can drive project forward, to lead conversations, to collect input, to summarize needs, to rationalize decisions, and to assist with implementation. That's how a product is built. And despite the functions, all the great people I work with share something in common. They emphasize so they can jump out of their own perspective and look through user lens. So that was really the experience I had. But if you ask me, what if they're not? What if they're just in their little bubble and they just hold their pride and they just think things should work the way they want it? Then they're the ones you have to advocate. You have to educate them to become similar to you, having that empathetic eyes. So that's a related question I got, is how can design have more impact? Like the perception that designers only create beautiful things is something we needed to be corrected. We need to correct them. We have to educate to be like, our job is to say that I know there are constraints as we're in a real world, but we also have to innovate. We represent the users. We push the boundary of making the impossible closer. We bridge the gap between technology and humanity. We have to educate others. We have to turn them into allies. So that's the thing I was obsessed with. It's like turning user into UX thinkers. And I even went to the next generation. I held workshops with like 7 to 12 graders. I gave them the task. I'm like, if you need to design sneakers for your best friend, you have to put yourself in their shoes and you ask, what shoes do they want, instead of, oh, I think they're gonna like blah. So this is one of the kids that designed for me, because she interviewed me and she learned that I like foxes. So ultimately, I like orange color and shiny things, and also said I like heels, but I think it's tiring to wear them. So she designed flexible heels that can breathe. Oh, it just brought so many joy to me, and I had the biggest smiley face. And my last example is to educate accessibility with a broader audience. So this is my design at Google I/O in 2019. So we often think about accessibility as this is for the disabled, which is not accurate. It is not accurate at all, because every single one of us have moments that accessibility, we need accessibility. So here are some example scenarios I draw. For example, when you're under direct sunlight, that can make you low vision temporarily, or you might not be able to touch screen while cooking, or you might have a cognitive impairment when you're in a different country with different language. And all those little moments could really make you feel like, oh, I need all the accessibility needs. This is really, I turn it into little cards, and you can pair it with different technology. There is a visual designer that I also worked with who put them into cards, and that cards went to Songdar. That's probably the best shot my work can never get to him in my life, but it was close enough. It was pretty fun. And the fun really continued from 2016 when I joined Google, where I also realized my existence is unique. Just like everybody else, it's like the work I should take pride for, and I should be my biggest advocate. And I should share my work, my learnings, my achievements. So I started giving back, and I harvested so many pleasant surprises. One of them is my portfolio was featured as the top 8 in 2019 by Best Follows. And then I was like, so what can I tell others? And I wrote an article about how to create a killing portfolio. And that got featured on Medium. So that I started also sharing my experience on Red, which is 小红书 in Chinese. That's the app about how I became a UX person, how UX designer are like in Google, or even how to recognize good boss and bad boss with my own experiences, if you're curious. And now I got 16K followers, and that's how I was connected to CDM today. So all those things are connected, and I really can't say enough about my appreciation to where I am now. And these are the top 3 learnings as my story is unpacked. Number 1, UX is about problem solving. That draws the difference between UI and UX. UI is really the execution, is the end of the process. And number 2, UX is all about users. It's not about yourself. It's about being empathetic and really knowing users' needs. And number 3, be a UX advocate. Everybody can have a keen eyes for users, and thus we can make the world a better place. So lately, I started also in Harvard Extension School, where I take courses and share notes about leadership, emotional intelligence, and etc. So hopefully that will also take me to the next stop. And by then, I'd love to circle back and share that with you all. And thank you. That's my story.
Well, thank you, Leecy. That's amazing, and we appreciate everything you prepared for us today. And again, how you drew the full circle. Again, giving back, and through Red connecting with Joyce, Joyce connecting you to me, and now you giving this talk to the master's program that you applied to many years ago. That anyway, it's interesting how life lines up sometimes. But I think we have definitely some more time before we move on to other things, and we'll get to questions that may be in the room. But I also just wanted to touch on a few things you discussed that will be relevant to this group too. So obviously, when you pursued your studies and you did your initial internship and didn't get an offer after, and you went into that moment of, oh, what am I going to do next? Or applying to 200 places and hearing back from 8. See, most people don't know that. So how did you handle other than going to Disneyland, like how did you deal with that stress of you're starting your job hunt and having to deal with the unknowns that comes with it? Like, how did you prepare for it and deal with the emotional roller coaster that was?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question. And this will definitely help with people who are about to experience it. My short answer is you just deal with it. Because back then, I didn't know what is ahead of me, and I have to just go for it. There's just no way around it. I can just comfort myself, bring myself to nice dinner, or just stuff myself with trash, junk food back then. It's just that there are definitely low times, and you have to give yourself that space. And there's definitely that anxiety and all the unknowns, and there's tears, regrets, or self-doubts, and you have to deal with. And that happened to everyone. It happened to me. It happened to my friends back then. And there are people who will have to give up because they don't get a visa. Even though they get a job somewhere, is that they didn't sponsor them, or the company sponsors, but there's a lottery in the States, so that they ended up not getting it. Life is just full of that possibilities, and you have to get ready for it. And the best way to get ready is just throw yourself into it. Just face the fact. And it's how scary as it sounds, and you will end up going through that hardship, and one day you'll be proud of yourself, who I am today, with all the up and downs, twists and turns. Now I'm just who I am, with all the stories that I am able to share. So that just look at me as an example. I'm still alive. I survived, and so can you. It's
and
just
you did well. I think you did well there too. So it's now, was the places you applied to, was that completely a cold call, applying out of the blue, or did you network, meet someone at an event? Did somebody reach out to you via a social, the Red app that Joyce made this connection? How did you how was the networking side for you being in?
Yeah, that's a good point to make too. Don't just lock yourself in a room and finger crossed for the best. Definitely go out, grasp any possible opportunity that was there. Mock interviews, workshops, people who are able to share their experiences, or school outreaches, or just chase after some of the recruiters, really aggressively look online. There's also cold calling. You could just apply to the jobs that you really wanted. If you get no reply, you could just keep applying. And then, because people would appreciate your passion as well. At some point, if you're the only person who didn't give up, they will become curious about you. They will reach out to be hey, so what kind of job do you really like? We have this type of opportunity. Do you want to give it a try? So I definitely went for all type of opportunities available there with people who are in the industry. They have a little talks, panels. I was hosting some of the panels with them and asking their contacts and ask their for referrals. And yeah, go for it. LinkedIn is your best friend, and just like Google search any kind of opportunities. If you want to apply for Google, just apply. I got so many like inquiries, and they're like, oh, Google sounds really intimidating. How can I get prepared for Google? My answer is just go for it, because there's nothing to lose, and you're just starting your career. There's just like so many amazing things that could happen as long as you keep pushing. If you just like sit there and be scared and do nothing, then nothing can just really just come to you. They will just be knocking on your door, but if you don't open, and then all the possibilities are outside.
Great answer. It's appreciated. And definitely, you know, I think this advice carries not only for the search for that initial job or just get, but how you advance your career, right? So again, you've been discovered, we'll say, through giving back, and you're continuing to, you know, to give back in different ways too. So one of the things that I discovered about you that I thought was really cool was that you did contributed to the Stop Asian Hate campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about that with a partner, a business? I don't know. I saw somebody else on the site with you, but you did some design work on it. What was that about?
Yeah, I'd love to share that aspect of me, because there was definitely a transition moment. I am born and raised in China. I only went to the States in almost 25, 26. So I'm definitely a grown up by then. All my culture was deeply rooted in just Asian culture, to be really modest and not to mind others' business, and really to let the work speak for myself, not really making a big scene. And that kept me safe for a while, until I realized it doesn't really work here. It's like, if you don't claim your work, you don't become your biggest advocate, nobody will. And you really have to be not shy. If you did something, just say it out loud. That was like the first learning I had. It's like, there's nothing to be ashamed about. You did all the great work. You're supposed to be like, hey, I did this. This is great. I'm proud of it. You should be proud too. And I'd like to share it with you. So that's the first aspect that happened to me. And this year is in particular difficult, because all the Asian hate and racism that just brought me into deep sorrow. And it also gave me a lot of self-doubt. And I started thinking, is it because of our Asian culture to just mind our own business and keep our heads down, and only just to let the work speak up to ourselves, making ourselves the victims of the center for all this hate? Is it really our responsibility, or anything that we could do to bring this culture to other side? Because where hate really came from is from ignorance, is from not knowing what that culture is, so that we can carry that mission to introduce our culture to a broader group, a broader audience, so people on the fence, they could really see all the wonderfulness from our own culture, from all the amazing insider Asian culture. But if we don't introduce it to others, and they can really get into it, and then from the edge of that group will really have all the fear and hate. And hate is really powered by fear. And that was like my second learning there. And the third is really like, my power came from myself. It's like even more brave. I talk about this more often. There's something I can do, and I can have influence. I can have an impact, no matter how small I am or insignificant I am. It started from me. That's where I started to do all this campaign. And once I did it, all my friends were like, oh, we're so supportive. We'll print all the posters. I'll put a sign on my yard. And all that just started as like a movement. And you see how cool is that? Is that we're just like a group. We can support each other, and we can build things from ground up. We can really create our own community. But it all started from ourselves. Is that we can't just sit there and wait and to see something will happen to us. And what will happen to us is we become the victims because we're not really speaking for ourselves. So that's where I really think that transition or that transformation came to me, that became who I am today. And I urge every one of you just to think through that, because like how insignificant you are, you're resilient and you're strong. You made your way to here, and you have all the stories that came with you. And I'm sure it's as inspiring as all the story you have heard. You just have to like package it up and have all the courage and go on stage and share that.
Yeah, that's really good advice, and it's really hard, I think, for people that are new to say, a country or getting landed somewhere, and also getting started in the career, the confidence that's needed, and that belief, and that it's there's so many challenges related to that, and the way you put yourself forward, but also created some initiatives around that is just impressive. So I'm applauding you for that, and I thought that was super cool. So I also wanted to congratulate you because I thought even since we connected, I saw you got promoted within Google. You're now senior. So
Right, yeah.
another congrats on the.
Thank you. I just received so much kindness from this group. And yeah, don't get me wrong. I definitely think that there are challenges that I personally deal with. It's more like I don't just became this overnight. It took me 7 years to get here. I used to be so shy. I went to school, even though that I studied at school about English. But when I get into the actual campus, I can't really have like daily conversations with others. I still remember the same when like somebody greeted me in the elevator saying, "What's up?" And I'm like, "I'm fine, thank you." That was what, as like a reflex that was built in me. Like all the Chinese students might relate to that. It's really the way we all have to learn, and it takes time. And we turn to be also very self-critical to beat ourselves up. So it takes time to get here. And there are definitely challenges, and I'm sure everybody will have it. But just like, just look at me as an example. It's like you can get there in no time as well. Yeah, that's all I can say to you. As long as you don't give up and you're just like, I'm the best. I'm here for a reason, and just keep going.
Just saw Lan post, haha, we learned the same English textbook about that. Fine, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
So actually, yeah, I'd mentioned when we were chatting earlier that with you coming from the CUC, the Communication University of China, that was Bill Zhao, who many of the students on this call know, also went there, and I think he was in the program, but his classmate, Shiva Shen, I think may have been in your class.
Oh, right, yeah.
Was it Shiva? Yeah, Shiva. That's kind of a cool. We have some MDM connections, and I know Bill has returned many times, and we do appreciate those connections, and we've had some amazing graduates from there. So kind of wish you went to the MDM yourself, but this is also an interesting connection. So again, we'll take the advice, the guest speakers from anywhere, and this is some very very solid advice. And I do think a few of the things that you'd mentioned, like the blog post about portfolios, I'd love to be able to share that link with the others on this call. So I don't know if we get a chance later to put it either in the chat, or we can email it to me and I can share it with everyone. But the portfolio advice would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I will forward the email. I'll forward the link in the email.
It looks like Mary already found it for us there. She's like, if it's the bootcamp UX design, 4 simple tips for killer UX portfolio.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
well,
good sleuthing, Mary. I'm applauding you for that too.
No worries.
Yeah. Love awesome. It. Yeah, that's exactly the one.
Yeah. Oh, and Ivy Sang. Ivy Sang was also in your class, possibly. I was looking at the history of students that have come from CUC around that time. Ivy. So she's an audio designer now, I believe. Oh, it's Ivy. But anyway.
I see. Cool.
Yeah.
There are a lot of alumni from CUC that just made me super homesick.
Ah, right. Yeah, that's I mean, no one can travel right now, so we're all stuck where we are, I guess. But hopefully you can get back home or have a visit when you're ready. But also we'd like to have you visit us in Vancouver.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah. But actually, I know there's going to be other questions in the class here too. I've monopolized a lot of the time, and I'm apologizing for that. But if anyone has a question for Leecy, please take the time.
Yeah,
I'm
type in
sure
the
Joyce does.
chat.
Joyce has got to have a question. If she doesn't, I'm throwing one at
I
her anyway.
do. You can read my mind. So Leecy, you mentioned that like you worked in boutique agency as well as like big tech giants like Google. So I'm wondering, like, can you share a little bit about like the pros and cons in two different contexts, please?
For sure. Yeah, I got that question a lot actually. I just chatted with a friend like 10 minutes ago before we joined this chat, and he has a YouTube channel where he's like, I will share that channel as well. It's amazing. He's also a designer at Google. And he said, oh, one of the biggest questions I got all the time is the differences between working in an agency, like a small company versus a big tech. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome because I work in both. So I had experience. Trying to think of what is the biggest difference. In the smaller settings, you definitely take on bigger tasks because there are just like less people there, and you are required to wear different hats. Sometimes you're a designer, sometimes you're a project manager, or like you have to take more responsibilities as condition changes. So that's like a really good exercise. Not to say that in big companies you don't have opportunity to take on bigger chunks, but it takes longer because it's a big company. Everybody has their little plate to build off. So that's like the biggest, one of the biggest difference. And the second is like the relationship between coworkers are different, as I mentioned in the talk, because in the smaller companies, if it is facing the outside, which is more like you have client work, then clients are your stakeholders, and then they'll have meetings with you, give you requirements, and then you can take on the requirements and deliver the projects. Versus in the bigger companies is more like internal stakeholders, so that you have your leadership, direct leadership, and you also have PM, you have engineers who work with you all the time, and they have their needs and goals as well, and you have yours, and you have to like navigate through all of that and build a relationship so that you can deliver together. And then that launches are more of the goals, and like I mentioned, it's like if it is client work, once you deliver, you move on to the next. Versus in product companies, big tech, the product never ends. For example, if you work on Google Docs, Google Docs is going to be there no matter if you are there or not, but you work on it for the time you're there. So it's more like evolving. It's like a longer life cycle. So that's another thing. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Well, if it is like startup, but is also a tech company, which is still products, then the pacing could be different. So startups usually moves really fast because they have to fail and learn. Versus big companies, because there's a lot of coordination with different people, and then it usually spaced out a little bit better. It's more like, okay, this quarter we're gonna launch XYZ, next quarter something, then the next, and usually the things are built into a near future. Versus startup is more like, oh, in this time cycle, in this 3 weeks, we're gonna launch this, and we'll see if it is actually a success. If not, then we'll just pivot to some other direction. So that could happen more frequently, and it could be drawing, but it can be really good exercise as well. So that it depends on your personality, your personal interests, and then you can just like weigh the pros and cons. Good.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I'm actually going to throw myself a correction here too, because I'd mentioned Ivy, who was at CUC as well. She's actually the studio UX lead at Electronic Arts.
Oh, cool.
So she's actually, we'll say, a peer in the UX space and a CUC grad. I posted her LinkedIn in the channel, so you can connect as CUC to CUC. I like connecting people. It's what I do. So anyway.
I can see that now.
So, and she's a musician. I got the audio thing because she's a flautist. I guess is that what you say, playing the flute? But she's amazing as a talented musician too. But
wow.
Anyway, there was a question. Oh, I'm going to post it in the chat, not just to Lucy. Let me just do this to all, just so you can see another amazing CUC grad, but there's Ivy Sang's link. You might recognize her. I think she may have been there around the same time as you. But there was a question in the chat. So what was the interview process like at Google? Was it multiple stages? Did you do the initial talent scout, then a panel, or any test? Like, what was the process for interviewing, working?
Yeah, sounds good. That's a good question. I would assume you're asking about designer interview, UX design interview, rather than engineer or product manager or anything. If it is a designer, yeah, I can give you more of a short rundown. There's usually 5 rounds of interviews. So first they started from recruiter calling in, so that there is the screening process. So they filter out some of the portfolios, and but if your portfolio go through that process, then the recruiter will reach out and you guys will have like a 30 minutes, just like touching base. And condition changes during COVID. Sometimes the recruiter will be like, oh, I think that you're already qualified. I don't have to like call to check in. I can just put you to the next round, which is more like talking with the designer. That's also like 30 minutes-ish. And during that process, you just self-introduce and you give them your background. And then you walk through some of your portfolio pieces. That's more of just like touching base and to see whether the vibe works and your background fits. And then the third round is about a design exercise. So if you pass the second round, you will be assigned with a task. And there's usually some of the challenges you can search online. There are a lot of them. Some typical ones are like, oh, changing the subway system, or if there is like a calling name system in a school, how would you design it? And it gives you, usually they give you like a week to do like offline exercise, and you put it into either slides, deck, keynotes, or whatever format that you're familiar with, and you send it over, and they will review it. And if you pass that stage, and then you bring the exercise on site. So the on-site is the 4th round, and it's the biggest round, and it takes about 6 hours or even longer. It's like almost entire day. My impression is you started with a group sitting there being your critiques, and then you work through the exercise, and you also work through a little bit of your portfolio. That takes about an hour, and then people will be asking you questions of like, how did you come up with your decision? And then they will break into rooms, and you go around the rooms to do one-on-ones. And some of them will be giving you a whiteboard challenge, and you'll be like designing with them. Some of them will be more like, oh, you'll do a little bit of coding pieces and just to see your coding abilities. And some of others will be just asking about collaboration, about teamwork, about how your design process is. And then somebody will take you to lunch, which is my favorite part. And when I'm at interview, there is like a lunch interviewer, or you just take people to lunches, and you don't have to give them evaluations, which is nice, so that I can just show them the cafes. I'll be like, yeah, feel free to just grab anything in the buffet. Take the chocolate mousse, for example. New York office have like amazing desserts. If any of you have ever come to New York, let me know, and then we can go grab one when COVID is over. But yeah, and after that in the afternoon, there's like continued one-on-ones. And that ends at like 3, 4, and then that's at that goes to the final round. So if you pass that on-site, the final round is I think it's just like chatting with the manager who is hiring. And sometimes, depending on cases, there might be multiple teams looking for you, and you ended up talking with different managers, and that is the final round. And then but my information was somewhere at least a year old, so there might be different alterations, during COVID, so that maybe phone screen could become just like a FaceTime, for example. But that's like overall to give you a sense of what that really feels like. And it takes about a month, like fastest, to get through everything, but still it can take longer. I think it took me half a year to finally get to Google because of the visa stuff that have to like transfer. So that give yourself some mental space there to get prepared as well. Cool. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah, I'm seeing an arm. Karen, yeah, I've got my windows open. Jump in.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Leecy. It was really inspiring. It helped me a lot. And I have one small question. Different companies seem to use different design titles in a different way. So I would like to know what's the definition when it comes to product designer and UX designer and interaction designer at Google?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. This is a fair question. And I actually had a post dedicated to this because there's just like a lot of different titles in different companies. If you're interested, you can check that out on the Red app. So essentially, what are most popular is product designer, interaction designer, UX designers. So those are almost the same thing. They all talk about UX process, and we all work with researchers, and it's all about user-centered interaction methodology. What would be a little different is for product designers, they are required to have more product thinking. They sometimes act as product managers. They have to have like business acumen, and they also do a lot of execution work. So Facebook, Yelp, Uber, this type of like one startups and now become unicorns, their titles are usually product designers. So the expectation is you can single-handedly create a product with or without guidance. So that also the requirement to execute, to have a visual design skills have to be solid. So for UX design, it will focus more on the methodology, the process, to finding problem space and really like analyzing user needs is like the most hardcore pieces. And usually in those companies, they also pair them with UI designers. So there's UI and UX, and UI is more to the front line of executing and also evolving the patterns and design language. So UX designers don't really have to worry about that. And then interaction design is more to thinking through all the possible interactions. So I think that only Google and some companies call the designers the interaction designers, because there's just like so many edge cases because Google products are facing everybody. So you can really think of like group experience, individual experience, enterprise experience, students, educators, and they all have different needs. So that there might be a lot of edge cases you have to think through, and then all the interaction could be different. So it focuses a lot of on what is the interactivity between devices, between users, between spaces. So I think that was why there was the emphasis on the interaction piece of it. But I can still see it evolving over time. Even within Google, there are people who prefer to call themselves product designers, and they can actually change their title themselves, and they'll be like, oh, I'm more comfortable calling myself product designers or UX designers. So you don't have to be so hung up on the title itself. It's more about your ability and your interests and your strengths. Oh, one thing as well is that's what Google usually would educate or train designers, is to have that T-shaped talent. So what it means is there is the baseline is the T, where you have UX capabilities, UX methodology, and you can use that thinking method, that critical thinking really well. So that's the T. And then there is like the branch that goes out, and that's more like something you stick out. You're special or unique in that position. You have your own strengths. Either it is about user research, or it is about visual design, or something that you are stronger at than anybody else. So that becomes your T-shape. And that was very encouraged to have, so everybody could have their specialties or their strengths.
So I'm sorry.
Oh, if you want to, you jump in. We're getting very close to the hour, but I was gonna, if you have a quick question, just.
Yeah, so even if you're applying for a job, product designer job at Google, it's not like they're looking for somebody who are specifically good at visual design or research. It can be just individually different, right?
Yeah, for different teams, they might be looking for different qualities as well, depending on different products.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I am going to say thanks. I'm also going to post I found the Stop Asian Hate signs and the link, the thing you did with, is it Zoe or Zoe?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, I would give it some recognition there because it's really cool. Yeah, and I think I went through your accessibility cards, and I think there was one fact that was connected to Canada. Like, there's as many blind or vision impaired people as there are people in Canada, or something really cool. It stuck with me when I saw it the other day, but I was like, that's awesome. Anyway, not that there's that many blind people, but that you made these cards that I think design. But anyway, thank you so much. Everyone appreciates the time. Amazing story, an experience that everyone here is about to have, and people like yourself taking the time to give back in this way. You're what makes the world a better place. So thank you.